Hi, my name is Fiona Sherlock and I'm so happy to take part in this year's Maria Edgeworth Festival. I am a crime writer and I'm also the current Meath writer in residence. So I write murder mysteries. And my most recent murder mystery, 12 Motives for Murder, was set in 1953. So obviously I wasn't alive in 1953, so there were certain things I had to consider from the historical perspective when writing this book. So for me, I suppose I start with the people and the characters, and I think back to how we are all really the same people. And we all fall in love, we all get jealous, we all feel angry, we all feel sad. So when beginning a story like 12 Motives for Murder, I have to think about the dynamics that might be at play in between family members, between a father and his daughters, a husband and his wife, a friend and his other friend. Shakespeare's work is so prevailing because obviously he writes about universal themes. So I really try and hone in on the interpersonal relationships and interpersonal matters that are at play when beginning to write a book that's set historically. Another consideration for a book set in 1953 that I really had to spend some time to get my head around was to understand the impact that the war had on the people who were alive in 1953. It was such a huge part of their lives. And many of them would have fought in the war. They would have done things in the war that they weren't proud of. Most people wanted to forget about it, to forget about the people that they'd lost, about the things that they'd seen and the things that they'd gone through. So that's one thing at the back of many of my characters, is their sort of wartime story, their wartime experience, and how that created, I suppose, a dark place within them, a place that made them liable to commit murder because perhaps they might have done it before. And then there are some of the sort of really historical facts that you can't get away from. For me, the most interesting parts and the pieces I had to do the most research on were telecommunications, travel, and geography. So, for example, with telecommunications, I have a character who's on a cruise ship, and I want him to get a message from the ship to Edinburgh. So I had to think about a telephone call. That wasn't possible in 1953. So it was a telegram. A telegram then I found out would be extremely expensive. So it would automatically point to somebody who had money. And then, for example, with travel, 12 Motives for Murder is set on the shores of Lake Como, which would be no mean feat to get to in December 1953. So, for example, there was one direct flight per week from London to Milan. Many characters would have travelled by train across Europe, and anybody coming from further afield would have had to take a cruise ship. So I have a character who comes to Lake Como from South America, so that has to be factored in, the amount of time that it would take their journey to get there. And then city maps. So I have, in 12 Motives, I have an address in Edinburgh. So I had to be extremely careful and double check that that address actually existed and that the street hadn't been bombed in the Second World War, which my initial address had been. So I suppose when it comes to writing, there's sort of two approaches, where the first one is where you start with the fact and build the story all around that. So, for example, in 12 Motives for Murder, the main character had gone to war with his brother. That was a fact, a historical fact of the time, and sort of built the foundation for the story. And then there's the finessing the facts. And I suppose this is the case where making the facts fit the story. So that's the example I gave there of sending a telegram from a cruise ship as a means to get information to somebody. And that doesn't always work, because things have to be plausible as well. So sometimes a fact, if the research isn't done promptly and ahead of time, the fact can involve a pretty significant rewrite. And especially I'm very conscious of it when I'm writing book set in the 50s, and the book I'm working on at the minute is set in the 1970s, that so many people were alive at that time and are very familiar with that time period and how people lived. So they are my little musings and thoughts on writing murder mysteries that are set in a historical time period. My book 12 Motives for Murder is available on ebook and in audio format, and my Irish published book Preserved is also available on ebook and paperbacks to follow at some point during the year, thanks to COVID for that delay. If you'd like to find out more, you can visit my website fionasherlock.com. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to hearing more from you soon.